Good day, everyone. I will be presenting our paper entitled Evacuation Planning in Baseco Compound, Manila City, Philippines, in the event of a storm surge. The objectives of this study is to provide an effective and organized system in which we can maximize designated evacuation centers in Baseco, provide a proposal that could guarantee the evacuation of all residents in Baseco affected by the storm surge, and provide an effective evacuation plan in the midst of a pandemic such as the COVID-19 pandemic. The data we needed for this study are as follows. First, the evacuation sites wherein we used the list of schools which will be used as evacuation centers. We determined their capacities and determined their exact location in Baseco. Next is the evacuees. We took the data from the Philippine Statistics Authority for the total population and computed the population for each cluster we made in Baseco through computations using the area of our chosen clusters. We also determined the loading and unloading time based on Google Maps, and we also needed the vehicles that can be used as transport and determine their capacities to determine the travel time to evacuate all residents of Baseco. Lastly, since we took into consideration the pandemic, we used the IETF guidelines to determine the ideal capacity of the evacuation sites and the vehicles for evacuation. The following are the clusters we made for Baseco in which we used in the formulation of the models for the linear programming model and the network flow model. We also use these clusters to determine the exact or the estimated population for each cluster using their areas. And we took this data from the NOAA website. We will now proceed to the formulation of the models used. For this study, we formulated two models. One for the allocation and assignment of evacuees in evacuation sites, and the other is to determine the optimal flow of evacuees in their designated evacuation sites in consideration of the pandemic. For the linear programming model, we have the objective function, which minimizes the total accumulated travel time of each evacuee sent from source I to destination J. The first constraint assures us that evacuees from all sources will be allocated to a destination. The second constraint restricts the allocation of the evacuees to a destination such that the total number of evacuees sent to a destination will not exceed the capacity of that destination. The last constraint restricts the number of evacuees sent from any source to any destination to a positive number. Next, we have the network flow model. And in this model, we have introduced the idea of triaging evacuees during a pandemic, wherein evacuees will first proceed to a building or area to determine whether they have symptoms or not, and assign them to the designated evacuation area or isolation center. We also took into consideration the allocation of separate stations that will serve as the headquarters of designated health workers and officers, and storage for food and equipment. This is the network flow model for District 3, wherein the nodes represent the receiving stations, which are the S nodes, the triaging points, which are the T nodes, and from there, they will proceed to the evacuation center, or they will be brought to the isolation center, depending on whether they will have some symptoms or not. This network also contains details such as capacities following the IETF guidelines. This right here is for District 4, which represents a different set of evacuation centers. In simulating the data and proceeding with the sensitivity analysis, we have obtained results such as the optimal evacuation plan of residents in Baseco compound with minimal travel time. We have also determined the specific evacuation centers which will be used by the residents and the centers that will serve as isolation centers and the centers which will remain vacant. Lastly, the specific assignment of evacuation centers for each resident in each cluster made in Baseco compound. These are the references we have used in obtaining the data, formulating our models, and arriving with our results and conclusions. Thank you very much and have a nice day.